I can say without a doubt that the most advanced yoga I have ever done is raising children. And I used to wrap my legs behind my head every morning before coffee. My name is Sarah Ezrin. I'm a writer, yoga teacher, content creator, and the mom to 2 young boys. I recently wrote the book, The Yoga of Parenting, 10 yoga-based practices to help you stay grounded, connect with your kids, and be kind to yourself. One of the highlights of this journey has been sitting down with parents from all around the world to hear how yoga has informed their parenting. Their stories are fascinating, funny, raw, and sometimes heartbreaking. I spoke with step-parents, single parents, grandparents, and though everyone's identities and family structures are completely different, all of these parents have the same intention: to parent from a place of connection. I am honored to share these stories with all of you in this limited series podcast, The Yoga of Parenting. All right. Well, I am very honored to sit here and to listen to what Jane Austen has to say. I call you the queen behind your back. I don't know if you know that, but I like the queen of the Bay Area prenatal. And now, thanks to the everything going online, now the whole world, and I know people would come from all over the world to come study with you, but I feel like you have an even wider reach now, which is so wonderful. And I'm just so honored to have you here. You've been practicing with pregnant people for 30 years, whether it was through your midwifery or doula work, or eventually starting, what year was it when you started the Mama Tree and started teaching
Tree
prenatal?
was 06.
06. Okay.
Was my first.
So that's for, you're coming up on your 20-year anniversary. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Ooh,
and then I was teaching prenatal yoga before that, of course. So that's why I just made up, because I just made up the prenatal yoga. I just combined what I know about midwifery and pregnancy and postpartum and my love of yoga, and then I just put them together, and it was like the heavens sang. I mean, for me, because it's really my life work. I mean, I loved being a midwife, but it wasn't really my life work. This is my life work. So I mean, I feel so lucky and fortunate to do something for a living that I practically skip to work. I just absolutely love supporting folks at that threshold. It's such a poignant time in people's lives, and to be able to be there in that time is really wonderful.
Well, there's 2 things I want to unpack from that, because one of the things that you say in the book is that you like to be there at the threshold. And I want you to explain, I know in the book what that means, but explain to our listeners and our watchers what that means, which threshold you're talking about. Because we quoted in the book, but what are you talking about? What's that bridge?
Oh, I didn't read that part. So you're actually quoting me in the book?
Yeah, I wrote what you said in the book. I said Jane's favorite part of her.
Oh my God, that's great. I love that I just said that, and that's what I said in the book. I'll have to go back and I'll have to read it. I mean, that part. Of course I read it. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a rite of passage when we walk this path, and there's so few acknowledgments of that in our culture. Cultures all over the world have ceremony and ritual for pregnant women and pregnant folks who are making the transition into motherhood, and we don't have that at all. I mean, you have a baby shower and people buy you shit, and that's about it. So to be able to bring a sense of sacredness into that time, a sense of loving and caring in that really tender time, and it's so beautiful to be able to witness that. And the impact on that is, I mean, I feel it every day, and I hear about it from my students every day. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but people say to me all the time, the best part of my pregnancy was coming to the yoga classes and being in that space with the other people, and just honoring the pregnancy itself. Pregnancy is so pathologized in our culture, and we're basically terrified. We're terrified that we're going to do something to our babies. Anxiety is through the roof. Just like everyday anxiety, but clinical anxiety in the perinatal period is, I mean, people talk about depression, and that's common, but anxiety is actually more common. And just to be able to come into a space and then maybe just take a little bit of the load off, you know, to feel a little bit more ease in your life and in your body and in that moment. And hopefully when we do that on the yoga mat, it can translate into our lives in a really profound way, and in a way that we don't judge ourselves. You know, there's so much judgment that we have, and I know we fear everybody else's judgment, but the truth is most people are really self-absorbed and they don't really care what you do. I mean, they might spout off something, but they're really talking about themselves when they're judging you. So I think that we are our own worst critics. And what I love about yoga is we get to step away from that for a moment and just be with ourselves as we are, you know, warts and all, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's what I love about the yoga mat. It just keeps you honest, and you can just be how you are, and then that's okay.
And that's the space that you create. Yeah. I mean, that is the space that you create for people too, because yes, we know that as the yoga mat now, but that wasn't always the yoga mat for me. You know, the yoga studio was kind of a judgmental place, you know, in my early years of practice, and depending on the lineages that certain people practice under. And then there's, you know, when you have more high intensity, you know, where you're kind of like going towards things that are a little more performative, or you know, you're at studios where it just, you know, it feels like those things matter. As we get older and we come to the mat more often, we learn, you know, obviously all of that is, you know, starts to go out the door as the body falls apart. And you're like, oh, right, leg behind the head doesn't matter anymore. I'm happy I can walk. But you create that space for people that most of those people have never stepped foot on a yoga mat ever. And then people are coming in with all these ideas. There's all of this aspirational pregnancy now, especially because of social media, especially within our wellness world, what, you know, the pregnancy should look like. And you should just, you know, be in this flowing outfit, you know, down to the colors, the neutrals, you know, and all of that. And I love like coming into your rooms and into the spaces that you hold, because you're like, no, this is real. Like, you're going to pee, you know, you're peeing yourself. That's, you know, okay. Not normal, but at the same time, like totally okay. Like, I think, you know, I think people have gone into birth in your class. Is that people?
Well, I've definitely had multiple bags of water break. Somebody asked me that the other day. I'm like, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, many times. And I always say, and I know it's like my students are probably horrified to hear this, but it would be my greatest honor to catch somebody's baby in the yoga studio. Or at least I'll be there while we wait for, you know, their care to come, you know, or they go to wherever they're going to give birth. But to me, like that, I mean, I don't know if that would ever happen. It'd have to be a pretty precipitous birth, right? And pretty scary probably for other people. But I'm like, baby, I'll hold it down for you. I will hold it down. And, you know, usually the bag of water's breaking is usually like somebody kind of tugs on me and says, Jane, I think my bag of water's break. Because, you know, there's a little moisture in their panties. And I've definitely have had what, you know, what they call technically gross ruptures, which is like just like water. Like I had one gal, I like walk across. So she had this gross rupture. So she just had tons of water. And so she was walking across the yoga studio, and I could see the edge of her yoga pants, and I could see the drops of amniotic fluid dripping off her leg, the leg of her pant. I'm like, oh my goodness. So
well, we have this idea of like what it's going to be, you know, from the media, and that it's always this like gush of water, and then suddenly, you know, then the contractions come. But obviously it's very unique to every different person. Some people, your water could break, you know, days, right? Isn't it like how long before? I mean, I guess with the water breaking, like what's the distance between when your water is starting to leak?
Most people are going to be in active labor within 24 hours after the bag of water's releasing, right? So, but mostly if the bag of waters releases in labor, if you're having a vaginal birth, the waters will release during pushing, because there's so much pressure on the bag. So that's, it's real. I mean, of course, there's so much disinformation about how labor unfolds, and what we know just from media. We think that labor is like the breaking of the bag, and then all of a sudden somebody screaming and yelling, you know, at their partner, like, you did this to me. And it's like, like that's hilarious, but that's not true. It's not true. I've never ever seen that in any place other than in a sitcom, you know, and then my kids love it. Whenever there's like birth scenes that we're watching a movie, they look at me the whole time because they're like, they're like, Mom, you're going to be appalled. And, you know, I kind of like being appalled.
That's, I think was it Handmaid's Tale recently, with Elizabeth Moss, that there was where she gave birth on her own. And I feel like the feedback from people was that was the most realistic birth scene that they had seen on television. But for the most part, it is that derivative, you know, the screaming at the husband, right? Though always like
totally.
Even
Well,
the
it's
fact
funny
that
because
it is like heteronormative, and
I actually haven't watched Handmaid's Tale. It just feels
it's too intense. We
too
had
close,
to stop.
just too close. It's just too close. You know,
Yeah.
I feel like we're not that far from that. So in some states. So yeah, I read the book many years ago, and saw a movie with, you know, years back. Well, and it's funny, of course, I watched the British show called Midwife.
I didn't know there was one. That's great.
Oh, Sarah, you've never seen Call the Midwife?
No.
Oh my gosh, it's these women. It's after World War II. It's all these young midwives, and they work at with nuns. So it's like the women in the full like habits, right? Who are the also midwives as well. And it's all these young women who study midwifery, and then they go and they do home birth. So it's all home birth in kind of a poor part of London. So
I would love that. That's definitely up my alley.
You should check it out. They've had like 9 seasons.
Oh my goodness.
Seasons.
Okay.
The characters are so great. They're just so fun. And anyway, so yeah, Call the Midwife, baby.
Okay. All right. That's going on the list.
All right. You know, I'm gonna do an Instagram about it, because if you don't know about it, I mean, other people.
I never even heard of it, and I know most British shows. I am like, you know, every episode of Downton Abbey, and you know, it's like, you know, what was Broadchurch, and
oh my God, I love all that stuff too.
There's many. So one of the things that makes your classes so special, as well as having this space for people to be as they are, is obviously your amazing personality. And, you know, how I describe you in the book is your tell it like it is sense, you know, which is always fabulous and funny and great when you were a student coming to your classes. But obviously this is the Yoga of Parenting podcast. So I'm just curious for your kids when they were growing up. You know, I imagine that things were very much on the table. You never shied away from certain conversations. So what did that look like growing up? How was it received? Did it change over the years, like in teen years, for example?
Oh yeah.
Or did they embrace it the whole time? I'm sure now as adults, they're like, how lucky we are to have a mom like you. And but I imagine there were moments in the teen years where it was like, oh my God, my mom.
Oh yeah.
My mom is a prenatal yoga teacher.
My daughter definitely hit it earlier than my son. One of the rituals that we have around their birthdays is that I would tell their birth stories. So that was kind of part of it. And initially my daughter loved it. It was like, you know, for years and years. And then, you know, of course, my son, he's 3 years younger than her. So he would be there to hear her stories too, because we have breakfast in bed and I tell the birth story. And, you know, I think she was probably around 9, 10, maybe 11. She was like, no, I don't want to hear that story again. And then my son would be like, I'll hear it. So then she would be off in the other room and I would tell her birth story to my son. So they've always known. I mean, I have to say, one of my proudest moments as a mom is that my son brought home like just a quiz that he had in his sex ed class. And it had you know, somebody born with female genitalia had like, you know, and you had to label everything. He got A+. He got everything right. I was like, my job here is done. My job here is done. So that was one. But the other thing is, so a friend of mine gave me this book, and it was heteronormative. She gave it to me a long time ago, so it would be a different book now. But it was like a book for young men on, you know, when you're sexually active, how to be a good lover, and talking about female pleasure. I just got chills. And I gave it to him, you know, when he was probably, I don't know, 15, 16, maybe starting. He definitely wasn't having sex then, but I wanted him to have it. And I have to tell you, Sarah, when he left for college, so he's graduating this year, he took a book with him, and I saw that book in his luggage that he was taking to college.
That's your job
I
is.
was like, my job is done, man. My job is done. So anyway, so it's more like that, just having, and then if you look around my house, there's like boob art everywhere and naked ladies, and there's always been like kind of this celebration of the divine feminine in our household. And it's not like, let's sit down and talk about it. It's just around, and kind of the reverence of the female form. And there's like pregnant sculptures everywhere in my house, and so they've always been in it. But yeah, there was definitely resistance at one point, but they both came back around.
Which I knew they would. I had no doubt about it, that it's like, but you have to go through that phase, right? As well, of kind of, even if you have the coolest mom in the world as they do, like where you have to reject you in order to be comfortable and confident to go into this new phase of, of college or leaving home or wherever they may be. But I mean, that's what I say when I say your tell it like it all approach is like, you do talk about things matter of factly, because that is what it is. This is our body. This is the body. This is what the body does. You get pregnant. This is what your body's going to do. These are the sounds you're going to make. These are the things that are going to come out of you. And to normalize that, and to ground it, and to bring it back down to the humanness of it all. Like, what a gift, and we don't, I don't know how other cultures are, other than England and Canada, which is where my family is. But, I would imagine in more tribal cultures where people are, you're walking around without clothing, and the body is the body. And that's just, there is just an acceptance and an understanding. And I think we get really removed in the West, and especially in America, where things can get a little more puritanical. So I really appreciate that, because you tap us back into that more innate and intuitive part of ourselves, which really is, that's what pregnancy does for us, right? I mean, talk about that side of us coming out, where the other parts of the brain kick in, and it's just all happening. So how has that informed your parenting?
The which piece?
So the piece of, well, for definitely yoga we're going to talk about later, but specifically the piece of just, accepting the body for what it is, being like in much more of like an open, I mean, you said you were having these conversations with your son at a little bit of an earlier age, and, maybe giving him a book that most parents would have shied away from showing them to. And having the art around your house. So maybe you did kind of answer it, but I'm just curious, like in your parenting methods and in limit setting and things like that, were there discussions around that? You didn't really have the talk, but how did that all then influence your parenting?
I mean, I think it was always just a part of it. And because the body was never like something to be shameful of. And it's not like we walked around naked. I know families who do that. We didn't do that. But there was never like any like shame around the body. And I grew up, and I know a little bit about your past. I mean, we grow up with all this like self-loathing, and leading to all kinds of, pathologies in terms of like illness and eating disorders and those kinds of things. So, and I had a mom who didn't talk about it, but I knew she didn't like her body. I could tell that she didn't like her body. So I just never let that enter our house. Like, to me, I almost want to cry. It was so painful. It was so painful to grow up kind of hating your body. And it wasn't really until I found yoga that I really like embraced my body, and then and like accepted like my body for its magnificence. I always tell my students is that we've been hoodwinked to think that our bodies are anything other than absolutely fabulous. That we are an exquisite design. And do we need help times? Yes, of course. Is there pathology? Is there illness? Yes, of course. But our bodies aren't inherently bad. And of course, we know from the first book of the Bible, we're told that we are certain, made from Adam's rib, but also that we're bad and we're wrong. And when you have a Christian nation, Judeo-Christian nation, it's in everything, it's in everything. So that was just never, it's never been a part of anything. My daughter got bigger and smaller in college, gained weight, lost weight. And, I made every effort not to be like, oh my God, you look amazing. Yeah. Or like say, oh, I did have to tell her to cover up her boobs in high school, but I think she grew really large breasts. And I was like, oh, honey, you gotta put something on them. And she's like, this was when she had braces, and she said, oh, I said, because you're gonna probably get unwanted attention. And she's like, oh mom, you know what I just do? I smile at them and show them my braces. I was like, so she's like that, like body positive,
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think that's just kind of an offshoot of me not wanting to do not being around the culture that I grew up in, and also just having everything just really normal. Like it's our human body, we all have one, and it's normal, and we like to celebrate them. So yeah, I think that's just kind of been always in the mix.
I mean, I think, when the kids are younger and you're going through something like potty training, and, one of them takes a shit on the floor, and, you're like running with their poop to the bathroom. And then, there's or like, you're getting puked on, and, it's like you're taking them to the doctor, you're having these conversations. Body is, and like, you're obviously like, I walk around naked. My kids are 4 and 1, and maybe some people will disagree with that, but it's like the body is it is very natural. And everyone's going to the bathroom together, right? Like there is no safe space. The door is open.
The door is
and that
open.
Is just, you discuss everything, and but then something happens as they start to get older, and obviously I don't want to know about like, what's happening. I want my dad to close the door for sure. But I just wonder, it's at what point do we start that disconnection from body, and is that also, what is to blame, like you said, for when we start to, see our body as separate, see our body as something that becomes a project, see our body as something that we need to fix. So yeah, I loved your answer, because I love, can you keep weaving it in as these are normal functions of the body? This is a normal body. A body will change size, it will change shape, it will change ability. Yeah. And how do we, love it all the same and appreciate it for what it is, and know when it's time to seek help, when it's time to seek help.
Well, the crazy thing is, we bought a house that has one bathroom. And like, and you say that in the US, people are like, what? I'm like, one bathroom. You know how many times I've peed in the tub when someone's sitting on the pot? Like, I'm like, I gotta go pee. Like, I gotta go pee. So I'm hanging my butt over the tub many times when somebody's sitting on the toilet. And so I also think it just makes them really adaptable. And, we always thought we'd build another bathroom, but like, $100,000 plus later, and all the permits in San Francisco or whatever, like, it just never happened. And now it's just my husband and I, because we're empty nesters. So it's like, perfect. We don't really need another one.
This is like a vacation.
I know. I tell my moms when they're in my yoga class, my students, that, I'll hold their baby or watch their baby while they go pee. And I call that a spa pee, where there's like the door's closed. You can take your time, and you don't have to worry about anybody like coming in. So you can close the door, take some breath, do what you need to do in private. So
I had this moment yesterday. Don't worry, it won't be potty talk. Everyone's like, okay, all right, guys. But it was, I put the kids in the car, and then I walked around to the front door, and I had that moment where like, this was my vacation. I was like, I'm going to walk very slowly to the front door. And I remember somebody telling me about that like a long time ago, that like those moments of alone time and how precious they are. So like, whether it's in a bathroom, whether it's just that 1 minute of like walking, it wasn't even a minute, it was probably 10 seconds of like, and like how
you're
special
like,
and amazing.
Everybody's strapped in, my hands are free.
Yeah.
Take some breaths. Oh, I literally had that realization one time at the freaking dentist office. I was like, this is so relaxing.
Like root canal.
I thought, me, when you're parenting two like little rugrats and you're just, everything's so frenetic all the time, like where you are. And it's like, just to have literally just have somebody cleaning my teeth. I was like, oh, this is awesome.
And one more trick on that note, by the way, and like I know my husband will listen to this and then beyond to me, but is always to tell them that, like, I mean, I like to be everywhere 15 minutes early. So then I also get that 15 minutes in my car.
Oh yeah.
Because it's, you just got to kind of like overestimate how close things are, because if there is traffic, you want to be on time. But then I end up places, 5 to 10 minutes early, and I get to sit in my car, and that's my vacation right there. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's where
Sarah,
all the magic happens.
Exactly the same. Exactly the same. My dad was in the military. So if I'm not 10 minutes early, I'm actually late.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I always, and of course I married the polar opposite of that, right?
Same.
So I've learned to just like sit down and, listen to a podcast or read a book, or, just like, even the other day, I had this out, it's out in the living room, and my husband was running late. And I was like, oh, that's fine. I'm just going to read. I got a book to read right now.
Aw. Well, you're very
sweet.
I
hear you. I know those few minutes in your car where you can just either close your eyes, take a break. I used to, when I was pregnant with my second, I watched my sister's kid, and her son is born 2 days after my daughter. So I basically nannied him for the first few years of his life while I was just trying to figure out like what I was going to do. I was teaching yoga at that time, but I wasn't going to go back to midwifery. So anyway, so I would literally, I'd drive down. I know this is like not great for the environment, but I would drive up and down the Great Highway or around till they both fell asleep. They're in the back seat. So the two little, 2-year-olds, 2.5-year-olds. And I would find a spot in Golden Gate Park. I had a couple of spots that I liked. I would put the emergency brake down. That was back in the day, right? And then I would lie across the 2 sheets and take a nap. I would just nap until they woke up, and it was glorious. And
probably the best sleep of your life.
Knock on the window. I'm fine. I'm pregnant. Leave me alone. But it's so funny. It's like the bar is so low in terms of what those little moments that you're just like, oh, I get this for myself.
I mean, we can also get into the systems and how, there should be more systems in place, and, why we aren't with our village, and, you are your sister's village as an individual, and why, it goes back to, living as a community and what we used to and where we are. And that's a whole other podcast and a whole other conversation. But I do just want to finally end with that, and then we'll get into the specifics of the yoga, is that in that thirst for the village, in the thirst for ceremony, I just want to commend you for creating that for people in San Francisco, and now the people all over the world that get to take your class, because you are building that for us. You're creating it in a time where so many people, I mean, we didn't have any family at the time. My brother was in town, but he had his own toddler, but that was it. When I was coming to your classes and coming regularly, and, and then I wasn't even like, people were coming to your classes like every single day, right? You have people that are attending 3 times a week, and, these sisterhoods are forming, and pretty much everybody that I met in my mommy group was like, oh, I took Jane's class. I took Jane's class. So it's like, even if we weren't there at the same time together, later on, it becomes this bonding thing. So I just want to commend you for being that thread that is weaving people together, that is creating that pod that we need, and then now later becomes the help that we need down the road. So thank you for creating that.
Yes, of course. And people come up to me all the time in San Francisco with their 15-year-old or their 9-year-old, and they say, oh, I met some of my best friends, my best like mommy friends in your classes. And I was like, oh, my work is done. I mean, that's my greatest joy to hear that, So I just had somebody tell me that on Wednesday. She was like, Jane, you do know that one of my best friends I met in your class, and her kid is like 9. So anyway, but that happens all the time.
And I feel like, is it fair to say that goes back to the threshold again? It goes back to the gate, and like where you get to stand, as you get to meet people like before as they're,
I mean, some people come to your class that aren't pregnant yet, that are just curious. There's some people that train under you, but then they are pregnant, they pass through the gate, there you are, then the baby, if the baby comes, then the baby comes, and then off we go. But then they go on and they're living their life, and that's the gate we're talking about, right? It's that passing through to the other, the matrescence, and into
that passing through, but I'm there also on the other side of the river. So I teach those postnatal classes. I mean, they're chaos. Yeah, absolutely. I love in your book that you talk about doing tree pose in the chaos, like use vrikshasana for. I was like, oh my god, I totally do that in my class. Like if it's like all the babies are screaming, then we do tree pose, because when the moms start to focus, or the new parents really start to like focus, the babies are like, what's going on?
Yeah,
mom's not fussing with me. They find their breath. They're holding their babies and they're breathing. And almost always, I mean, not every baby, some babies sitting in a poopy diaper, but a lot of the babies will just go and calm down a little bit. But yes, that threshold, they come through the pregnancy, but I always say that I wait for them on the other side of the river so that I can welcome them. And that's part of the rite of passage. And that's where we come back to community, because when you're pregnant, there's people around, but like when you give birth, like that's your work to do, regardless of how your baby comes out. And we think about that as kind of the apex of the rite of passage, but that's just part of it. And then after going through the birth, like having somebody there waiting, and whenever the women go off and the people go off who are really, really pregnant, and I'll say, if you're still pregnant, I'll see you on Wednesday. Or I'll say, if I don't see you on Wednesday, I'll meet you on the other side of the river, and I'll be here waiting for you. I just got chills. Like I wait for them, and not everybody comes for all kinds of reasons. Yeah. But they come back, and so many come back. And sometimes, 4 to 6 weeks is when they're supposed to after vaginal birth, 8 weeks after cesarean birth. Sometimes they'll come back sooner than that. And they'll say things like, I didn't know where else to go, or I just knew I could come here. And, and this is my first outing. I can't tell you how many people tell me that going to the postnatal yoga is their like first big outing. Like one mom told me the other day, it was the first time I had the baby in the car seat and myself in the car alone was coming to my class. So it's part of that rite of passage, and I'm there. And then they graduate, and that's really kind of the end of it. Either the baby's crawling, or their mat leave is over, whatever comes first. And I always like to create a little ritual around that. So we do a photograph, and then I got little baby onesies made that said, "My yoga teacher loves me," with my little logo on the back, and I get to present that to the baby and to the mama and the new parent, and as like a graduation gift. And maybe they get pregnant again, I see them again, or maybe this is the end of this chapter. And it's always such a like, just like I've said, it's always such a privilege to be able to be there. And it's so needed, especially since, as you know, we have a culture that has no postpartum care whatsoever. So for them to even know that there's, and I'm not offering postpartum care, that's somebody else's job, but for them to know that there's a place where they belong, and that they will be welcomed with open arms, for sure.
Oof. And to because you were often the place where they last were before this tremendous transformation too, that it's kind of like, you're shepherding this new phase, this stepping into, matrescence, as people are starting to call it, right? Yeah. And I'm curious, because you've been in the industry now for a long time. It sounds like a newer word to me and some moms, but has this been around? This has been around.
It has
from the beginning of time.
I first encountered it.
Will you define it for us, by the way, your definition of it for our listeners?
Well, it's the acknowledgement of this transformation, and coming into our, motherhood or parenthood from this place. And it's so interesting because, we think of maiden, mother, and crone, but there's
so offensive, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Maiden,
I
mother,
love being called
crone.
A crone. No, I love crone. I'm like, okay. I embrace all the words. I embrace all the words, man. I think I scared somebody in class the other day because I said pussy like many times. And I saw the first time I said it, her eyeballs like popped out of her head. I said, I don't know. I was telling a story about somebody's bag of water breaking and her pulling down her pants. And, I'm looking at her pussy and I'm like, I've seen lots of pussies. I'm not afraid of pussies. And this gal, and I was like, oh, that lady is not coming back. She came back. I was like, okay.
She was probably she needed that. She needed that permission.
Yeah. So, but talking about kind of the maiden, mother, and crone, but there's also another piece to it that you must know Kimberly Ann Johnson.
Of course.
I
like fangirled. Yes, I'm obsessed with her. The
I'm
first
obsessed with her
trimester
too.
is that should be necessary reading for everybody.
Yeah.
I read it twice, and then I also sent her a book. So we'll see if she actually reads it or not.
Yeah.
I mean, they gave me an address, but I'm a huge fan. KAJ.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
she's amazing.
I want to be her. She's
her book Call the Wild is awesome.
That's what I was gonna say. Is the Call of the Wild is like
Call the Wild,
new, yeah.
And I've done Jaguar workshops with her.
Yeah.
I just did a mothering workshop, and it was so beautiful, so insightful, so real. I love how real she is and how honest she is. And it's just, to me, that's the sign of a great teacher. I always hate, like in yoga, people are like, fake it till you make it. I'm like, that's a crap shit. Fake what? Fake what? Pretend you know something that you don't know? I mean, be honest. I mean, when I train teachers, I'm like, you're not going to try to teach like me, because you're going to suck at it. You're going to teach like you, and you're going to be great at it. And you're just honest. And when you don't know something, you say you don't know something, but you have something to offer. So that's not faking it. It's just showing up and being authentic. And then your students will come to you, and they won't necessarily, I don't want to be on anybody's freaking pedestal. I mean, I love that you call me queen, but I feel like I'm more like a fairy godmother. I'm like, if you want a fairy godmother, I'll be a fairy godmother.
I like fairy godmother. We could work with fairy godmother.
Well, and I always say there was just a couple of things I'd give you. And one is patience. Like, as you walk the path of mothering and parenting, patience, endurance. And I know you talk about that in your book, and also resilience, resilience when things get hard, because things are going to get hard, and then we have the opportunity to find our way to softness in the hard spots, so that we can be kind to ourselves when things don't feel good or things fall apart. So yeah, I mean,
well, I would imagine it's similar advice for new mothers that you would give new teachers, which is, the don't fake it till you make it, don't look around. I mean, you tell me, because it like, that's what I was almost hearing was like, oh, you would be telling like a new mom this too, like, don't look at how I mother, don't look at how your mother mothers, or how your, partner's mom mothers, like, how do you do it? Is that true?
Yes, of course. I say it all the time. I mean, even when I'm instructing postures, I'll say, follow your breath. Don't follow the person next to you. They're following their breath. That's not relevant to you. You follow your breath. So, just kind of weaving that into the teachings. It's also like when you make decisions and choices that are different from somebody else, sometimes those people think that you are judging them or thinking that they made the wrong choice. And that's not true. I mean, we all make the best choices that we can for our families. And what's right for one person is not going to be right for another person. And that's all part of the yoga teachings. You don't have to know Sanskrit to really bring these elements of the yoga into practice, by just offering. And I think that's part of just like the acceptance. I had somebody say to me, oh my God, you have so much power to influence people. And I was like, I don't want to influence people. That's not my job. And they were talking about like having natural childbirth or home birth. And I was like, you know what? That was my path. That is not everybody's path. And I don't have any judgment when people are making the best choices that they can with what feels right to them. I mean, I get a little like my hackles go up when there's somebody having outside influences on the decisions and choices that people make. So, that book, I think we talked about Like a Mother. Do you know that book?
Oh yeah. That was another one of my required readings. So good.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah. And I love what, Angela talks about in that book. And it's just really infantilization is the word that she uses of pregnant people.
Yeah.
And it was like, ding, 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 ding. It's like, yes. Like, why would a person who is a corporate, CEO or lawyer or something, all of a sudden, like, have to go completely outside of themselves when they are really capable, competent people? There's so much fear, and we look outside of ourselves all the time, and that's what we do in yoga. We let go of that and we go in, and I just trust that.
So I was going to ask if you can give us a specific example of a yogic tool that would help with that, because it's all, coming to your class and then hearing you talk and you feel so empowered, and then you go outside and then it's like your mother-in-law sends you a text, or you see aspirational motherhood on social media.
Right.
So is there something specific in the yoga tradition? You and I, like, we know we speak of yoga as an umbrella. Is there a specific practice that you can give to the listeners or the viewers that maybe they can walk away from when they are feeling like they need to, find that inner ferocity?
I have all kinds of tricks.
Like,
I have all kinds of tricks.
How much time?
How much time do you have? So, I mean, obviously using your breath and using the exhale to shed and release, and focus on your exhale when you're needing to, like, let go, or if you need to be more nourished, more fed, use your inhale to nourish you. So that language is all through the practices, of course. But sometimes you just want the person at Whole Foods to stop talking to you. So I always, I have my list of things to get people to stop talking to you at Whole Foods. And one of them is, I always do this, like, no, thank you in the tapas practice. It's like, back off, sorry, you're under the delusion that my decisions are relevant to you, or, or that your opinions are relevant to me. Or I'm always like, you can do this. Oh, I'm just stretching out my fingers. My wrists are really stiff.
So for those of you listening, Jane is pushing her hand forward, like as if you were like, stop. And then very gently pulling the hands back, the fingers back.
To
Look how flexible your fingers are, though, by the way. That was amazing. You were, your fingers were so flexible.
Or lion's breath, where you stick your tongue out.
Yeah.
So, and also just bringing the humor into it. I think that, laughter is such good medicine, and tears. That's the whole beauty. I love it when, I don't love it when people cry in my class, but I honor it. It means that they're feeling like they're in a safe space. And I had a mom tell me not that long ago, probably about 6 or 7 months ago, she just said she just felt a tightness in her throat, and she just had never really felt that before. And she started to cry. And it was amazing when she started to cry. She said she didn't even realize it until later, but that tightness, like, softened, and she could breathe a little bit deeper. And it's because there was this space that was allowing for the tears to come. And I always love the tears in the practice because they're sacred. They're sacred. They're a release. And I always tell my students, there's a river of tears. So your tears are joining the river of tears that has flown, flowed in this space, so it's part of it. So just being kind to yourself, and those practices are simple. Like, even what you said about walking around the car and then just taking that moment to yourself. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. We think of yoga, like what we spoke about, kind of performative and peak poses and that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, you can do that stuff, whatever. But it's like having that moment of mindfulness, just walking around the car and taking some breaths. So reminding your students that they can bring these really simple practices into their day and into their lives. And it doesn't have to be on a yoga mat. It can just be paying attention.
Yeah, I would argue that most of the yoga that we do these days as parents is not on the yoga mat, right? that what's on the yoga mat is more like dance and movement now, right? It's like the yoga is actually being practiced off of the mat.
Yeah.
But I end all of these asking the same question, which is, how has your yoga, what's the most surprising way? Let's start. What's the most surprising way that your yoga has informed your parenting? Because I think surprising is what always gives the best answers.
Well, I think certainly when the kids were little and I'd go to the yoga mat, it was kind of like a refuge from them, like trying to get away from them. And yeah,
it is.
yeah, get away from them just for a little bit. I mean, I was at home with my kids when they were little, so I had a lot of time with them. So that was precious, but also, that's what it was kind of initially. And then I just feel like it sort of evolved as the parenting evolved, and more of like really being able to bring the tools that I was practicing on the yoga mat off the mat, and realizing that was really informing how I interacted with my kids, and how I would try to be more patient with them, because children have small legs and it takes them forever to get anywhere. So so just having like cultivating that patience on the mat, as I'm working through the asana practice and trying not to be too judgmental, and then having that just like manifest in a completely different way than the asana, because a lot of us come into it because the asana is fun. When you've got a strong body and you're like, can do all kinds of back bends and you're doing all kinds of arm balances, and it's like a party. It's fun, right? I mean, that's how I felt, because I was actually I was heavier, and then I had slimmed down, and I was practicing yoga, and I was like, wow, this is really fun and really cool, and it felt very physical, in those days. And then something really shifted, and I started studying the sutra more, and really realizing that like the yoga sutra has affected my parenting way more than the asana practice. Studying with Kate Holcomb. I don't know if you know Kate, but she's in the Bay Area. She's amazing. She's got 4 kids. And, I mean, obviously anybody can teach the doctrines or whatever text, but there was something about learning from a mom of 4, like how relevant, if somebody has some kids and they can do, 3 hours of asana practice a day, that's amazing for them. Like, I'm not judging that, but I need the yoga when the shit hits the fucking fan.
Yeah.
Because my kid just broke something that meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
Right. So that's when I need the yoga, so that having a teacher that can use kind of the day-to-day, even the mundane stuff or the boring stuff, to help us find our yoga practice where it's really impactful in our lives. And I mean, most of my yoga happens now. I mean, I still like roll up my mat and do postures, and which I still love. But when I get out in nature, or I'm, walking in the redwoods or on the beach, my husband and I hopefully are going to go to the beach later. I don't know, the weather might not be cooperating. It was so nice yesterday. But it was our anniversary yesterday. And we got married at Rodeo Beach in Marin. So we like to go there. And I swear, I get on that beach and it's like, I literally, do you know that beach?
No, and I'm in San Rafael, so I should definitely look it up.
Oh, girl, it's right in Sausalito. It's Fort Cronkite.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you've probably been to the beach. It's got the little green rocks on it.
Yes.
We call it LGR, Little Green Rock Beach. And I literally like face plant. Like, we get there, and it's the first thing I do is I just face plant and breathe. And yeah. And it's funny because my husband's a surfer, so he's always looking at the waves and I'm always looking at the ground.
That's amazing. What a good combination, right?
Oh, yeah,
it's like totally. The grounding and the flow, So Jane, where can everybody find you?
I'm at janeaustinyoga.com or Jane Austen Yoga on Instagram, and Prenatal Yoga with Jane Austen is Facebook. I don't really do that much on Facebook. So yeah, I try to post really fun, interesting things. I do Mama Tree prenatal yoga teacher training. I do it twice a year. I just did my first in-person one.
I saw that. Yeah. How did that feel?
Oh my God. It was awesome. It was it was incredible. It couldn't have been better. It was just really exactly what I needed. But I am going to do my next one is going to be on Zoom because it's international when I do it on Zoom. And I have people from Sweden, Germany, Japan, and Michigan. So Hawaii, I had one gal come in from Hawaii. So, one gal from Singapore, what the heck? So, I mean, I want to be able to offer it. And that's in a really different format. The in-person one is like 5 days, certification, come to San Francisco, we'll just get this thing done. And there's homework and all that kind of stuff too. And then the one that I do in the fall is actually really spaced out. So it's one weekend a month. So that's kind of a new format. And I always want to make it really accessible to parents. Because, some people will do like 10-day prenatal yoga teacher training. I'm like, what mother can take 10 days off their life to do a training? Like, I don't know who can do that. So it's always been my goal is to make it really accessible. And I used to say that it was the sound of a breast pump is the soundtrack to the training. Like somebody is up against the wall, pumping her tits.
That's amazing. Amazing.
So that's my thing that I love. I also do a birth prep workshop. It's a 2-hour. I call it Prenatal Partners. So I've been doing it for decades. I teach it every month, recommend 3rd trimester. I do have a recorded version of it. So there is an on-demand version that you can find on my website.
Yeah. Send me links to all this and I'll put them all in the show notes so people can have easy access on how to find all of these offerings.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Wonderful.
So fun to chat. We can chat for hours, girl.
I know. Thank you. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening and watching and however you're tuning in, and just have the best day.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Yoga of Parenting. Everything we discussed will be found in our show notes. You can purchase a copy of the Yoga of Parenting book anywhere books are sold. And please remember to subscribe, rate, and share these episodes so we can get all this wisdom to as many parents as possible. Follow me on Instagram at Sarah Ezrin Yoga, and the original music that you heard both at the beginning and just a moment ago is by the amazing Egeman Sonley. You can follow Ege on IG at Egesan, Egesan, and you can find all of his amazing music on Spotify. Big thanks to Kyle Rebar for being the best producer that there ever was, and big thanks to all of you for listening.